So I'm Ben. I'm from the FSF PopCast, and we have been slightly lacking in our fantasy department. So I'm going to go on a very long, well, hopefully very long rant about all things Lord of the Rings, between movies, books, characters, actors, and everything in between. All right, starting with number the first, the king of all men, the wonderful Aragorn, son of Arathorn. And how he's very different from book to movie. So, for starters, in the books, the King of Men almost immediately takes up his rightful position. He takes up the reforged Narsil, now called Anduril, Flame of the West, and intends to make his way towards Gondor with Boromir. And he's just ready to go. He wants to go and help Gondor and take up his rightful place as king. Whereas in the movies, he's a reluctant king. He almost refuses his birthright up until the point where Elrond shows up and says, "Hey, Arwen, your girlfriend, my daughter, will die if you do not take over the King of Gondor." So, yay, that's fun, but wonderful character development. Speaking of Elrond, he's referred to as Elrond Half-Elven, mainly because he's exactly that, he's half an elf. He was given the choice to be part of either the race of elves or mortals, and he chose to be part of the immortal, ever-going elvish land, which is cool. But he's not the only half-elf. There are quite a few others, but one of the more important ones is Luthien Tenuviel. But she is not half-elf, half-human. She is half-elf, half-Maiar. We'll get into that in a minute. And she's referred to as Iluvatar's, or the most beautiful of Iluvatar's children. Iluvatar being the god of that world. And was based off of Tolkien's wife, Edith. That's kind of a trend you're going to find out. All the descriptions of beautiful women in the entirety of The Lord of the Rings is literally just Tolkien being an absolute simp for his wife, and I totally understand. Literally right behind the camera is my Tenuviel, laughing hysterically as I'm doing this rant. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, I said Maiar. What in the helm of Hador does Maiar mean? Well, Maiar are basically powerful spirits. They could be river spirits or just things like that. But more importantly, the Maiar are servants of the Valar. What is a Valar? They are incredibly powerful creatures, spirits per se, that have particular domains. A lot of people will confuse them with gods. They are not gods. Tolkien was very specific that they are not gods. I would equate them more to like angels. And the Valar are pretty much angels and ruled over by Manwë, which you can consider the Archangel. Manwë is the king of the Valar and Lord of Winds and Eagles. Oh, speaking of the Valar being basically like angels and stuff, they flat out say that they have to create their own forms because their true forms would be too great for any eyes to see, including the elves. And we're getting into like biblically accurate angel type territory. It's also interesting how in the Silmarillion they're described as clothing themselves in elements and gender because they don't have it. So, yeah, it's interesting. Even though the Eagles are subservient to Manwë, they also have their own king, which is Thorondor, Lord of Eagles. Everyone needs a king for some reason. I am unsure why. He's the greatest of Manwë's eagles, with a wingspan of roughly 180 feet. Thorondor is also the one that grabbed Gandalf and the dwarves in The Hobbit, along with Thorondor and two others swinging their way in to Mount Doom after the destruction of the One Ring. And I believe Thorondor was also the same one that saved Gandalf from the Tower of Isengard. Not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure. Oh yeah, I lied. Not everyone has a king. Our beloved barefoot folk haven't had a king in like 400 years. In fact, they have a very interesting system where they have kind of a pseudo-king called a thane. Now, the thane, for the most part, just has ceremonial purposes. Doesn't really do much. But they do things in kind of like times of great strife, famine, drought, storms, things like that. But that hasn't really happened in a very long time. They do have a mayor. And when it comes to those two positions, the mayor does the most, and the more important things, like running the post office, and yeah, that's kind of it. But out of those two positions, Mary was Thane for roughly 20 years, and Samwise Gamgee was Mayor of Hobbiton for 50 plus years. And now for some beautiful knowledge of the other small folks, the dwarves. Dwarves are actually the first race in Middle-earth. They are created by Aule, another one of the Valar, long before any of the elves ever showed up, to their own dismay. The first dwarves are called the Seven Fathers, the most important of which being Durin. In fact, pretty much all the dwarves we see in both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are referred to as Durin folk, because they are all part of that lineage. They are all of Durin. It was also Durin who formed the kingdom of Khazad-dûm, also known as the Mines of Moria, and is why the Balrog is referred to as Durin's Bane. You want to come talk about Lord of the Rings stuff? Are you interested in the Balrog?
She is the Balrog.
Okay, let's talk about the Balrog. So, Josie. Whoa, Angie. So, did you know, Josie, that the Balrog is actually one of the Maiar? I know, right? So the Maiar are incredibly powerful spirits that I mentioned before, but the Balrogs are Maiar that were twisted by the evil Valar known as Melkor, also called Morgoth by the elves. Look at this little goblin. I'm going to put you down so you're not angry about it. Okay. But yes, the Balrog is actually on par with Gandalf, because Gandalf is also one of the Maiar. All of the wizards are actually Maiar as well, so it gets fun with that. But at one point, there were thousands of Balrogs, all of them under the service of the Dark Valar, Melkor, and there was a whole war that happened because of Melkor, and all the Balrogs fought in that war, and out of them, only 2 people were able to kill any of the Balrogs, one being the Elf Lord Ecthelion, who killed Gothmog, the king of Balrogs, because everyone needs a king, again. And, I know, right? And Glorfindel, who also killed a Balrog. Now, the funny thing about Glorfindel is that his only scene in the entirety of the books was basically taken by Arwen, the rider who comes by and grabs Frodo and brings him to Rivendell across the river, fighting the Nazgul the whole way. That was supposed to be Glorfindel. But then they changed it to Arwen because no one at that point knew really anything about the Silmarillion. So why would they throw this random elf lord, who's probably one of the most badass characters in existence, in there? So they made Arwen more of an actual character, because in the books, she doesn't do much. She's there, and she's sad because she can't marry Aragorn immediately, but they made her more of a character, which I liked. Anyway, jumping back into the dwarves, because dwarves are awesome, during the Battle at Helm's Deep, Gimli makes their way into the beautiful glittering caves, and basically says that he wants to work in the caves, build it out, make it more majestic. Legolas, not knowing any better, comments saying that he just wants to mine it and Absolutely not. Gimli, son of Gloin, would never destroy the Glittering Caves. He even comments saying he would do no more than an inch a day, opening up new caverns, new passages, just allowing natural beauty to accelerate. Actually, after the War of the Rings... Stop it. After the War of the Rings, Gimli ends up becoming the Lord of the Glittering Caves, and is given, basically, title of Lord by Eomer, who at that point becomes King of Rohan. So, the speech that Theoden gives in the movie, where he's screaming just death and as they charge forward, that did happen in the books. But it did not happen until later. Theoden gives a big speech, they all charge in. The screaming death as they charge was not given until Theoden died. The death charge was given by Eomer, rallying the troops again and charging back into battle as a kind of symbol of both the king is dead, he thought his sister was dead, and he was kind of just scaring off the idea of death. That no matter what, it would come for them and just wanted to finish the fight. Eomer, they were expelled from Rohan, or at least from the capital city, by good old Wormtongue, who... That's just a bad guy name. Like, it's just a bad guy name. Theoden's new advisor is Wormtongue, also referred to as Serpent Tongue. Do you mind? Funnily enough, Wormtongue was not working for Saruman when he first showed up, but then because he wanted Éowyn, and Éowyn...
He's just an opportunist?
He's like a 2 and she's a 10.
Well, yeah.
And then Saruman was like, hey, I'll get you some ladies if you completely destroy a kingdom. A lot of the names are very similar to each other in many different reasons, such as Arwen and Éowyn. Éowyn was supposed to be like a, look, your potential girlfriend could die, here's a backup. And the absolute simp that is Aragorn said, no, I have only one woman in my heart, and that's it. And that is Arwen Evenstar. To which, when they first met, Aragorn was so enamored by her that he believed that she was the reincarnation of Luthien Tinuviel, to where he even basically made the same call as Beren, calling out to Arwen saying, Tinuviel, Tinuviel. And she went, that's not my name, but thanks. Because that's the equivalent of saying, hey, you're the most beautiful thing in the entirety of the universe. Anyway.
Points at wife.
Yes. Fun little things about Tolkien's work is there are entire events around discussing the works of Tolkien. You can get a lot of that information on the TolkienSociety.org. At one of these events, allegedly, because I highly doubt this actually happened, but allegedly, there was a 6-hour debate if Tolkien's work had bees. Like, if the world had bees in it. There was a 6-hour debate that someone then claimed that they solved the problem by saying that Rohan had mead halls, and mead is made with honey. Now, that would be really cool and really great, but also highly unlikely, because there was an entire chapter in The Hobbit talking about the Beorns, where they said they had giant bees and made honey cakes. That was literally all the dwarves ate when they stayed at Beorn's house. So that's fun. The music. Tolkien absolutely wanted to write a musical. Hands down. The amount of songs that are in The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, everything can be turned into a song. And that's also incredibly important to the actual mythos of the Tolkien universe, because Ilúvatar, who is the one true god of that universe, created everything with music. He sang the Valar into existence, and then the Valar sang everything else into existence with Ilúvatar. It was Melkor that made a discordant tune that created evil in the world. It was that song of evil, basically. Because Melkor wanted to be the most powerful, and obviously was not as powerful as God. But there's a lot of really cool songs you can hear of people making their own versions of it, and you can find a lot of those. One of the channels I highly recommend is, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, Calamavi de Profundis on YouTube or Spotify. I'll put that in. We'll do that in post. We'll make a link on that in post. But that's fun. In fact, for the most part, music is center point to everything. There is music in the trees, music in how things are done. When Boromir dies in the books, the remaining people of the Fellowship, which at that point was just simply Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn, they sang the Lament of Boromir, asking the wind to basically tell everyone that they have lost a great warrior. Which, speaking of Boromir, there's a lot to discuss about Boromir. One of those things being that he wasn't supposed to be part of the Fellowship. When he goes to Imladris, also known as Rivendell, he is sent on a quest to find out Isildur's Bane, not knowing what it is. He says, "Oh, I've had dreams about going to a place called Imladris, talking to Elrond, getting information, and potentially saving the world. Hooray!" He lied. He didn't have any of those things. All of those dreams were done by Faramir, his brother. This is why, when Frodo finds Faramir, it is a test of quality. And my God, all of Gondor's quality was in that man. To which, speaking of Faramir, because this man, so basically just second-born son was left alone by his dad and said, Boromir is better than you. But yeah, Denethor basically just said to Faramir, just, hey, you're trash, kid. But your brother, though, and sent Boromir out on the quest to get an answer for what these dreams are, claiming that they were his dreams instead of Faramir's. They also had a whole thing, the whole, one does not simply walk into Mordor. That was not super intentional. So, Sean Bean showed up, like, right before filming, and therefore did not get a chance to memorize his lines. So when he's looking down and then goes, one does not walk into Mordor, on his lap was the script. So he's literally like, oh, I have a part, I need to say something. Okay, one does not walk into Mordor. So, a very iconic scene done because he didn't know what he was trying to say. Also about Sean Bean, he was terrified of helicopters. He walked to all the locations. So he woke up super early, got in costume, got in makeup, walked in basically armor with a big shield and a sword, and hiked up a mountain, rock climbing, as the son of the Steward of Gondor, all the way up the New Zealand mountain ranges, and then they filmed. Which, the whole filming process was absolutely insane, including the greatest man to ever man, Viggo Mortensen, aka Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir to Isildur's everything. He would go fishing in between takes. He actually found food and, like, foraged and hunted while they were filming. And just, I think he, like, roasted a fish while they were on the riverbank waiting for their part as the Fellowship fell apart, which I think is so hilarious. Also, the doubles for all the halflings, the people that played them when they were further away, we had the stunt double, or not the stunt doubles, just the body doubles for all the halflings while they were rowing down the river, and the river was super choppy. And the people that were in the boat with Viggo basically said, hey, if the boat tips over, just leave me. I can't swim. And that's terrifying when the people you are in charge of taking care of just go, let me die. Then there are many other things that Viggo Mortensen does, which is, these are the ones everyone points out in with the movies, where the orc chieftain throws the knife. He was supposed to miss. He didn't. He aimed directly at Viggo, and as the absolute king of men, deflects the blade, shattering the fake dagger. You see it in the movie. He just goes, ping, and it explodes. He could have died, but he didn't. There was also the absolute painful scene where on the edge of Fangorn Forest, they think the hobbits have died, and he kicks the helmet and just screams in pain. Because he broke his toe. He actually broke his foot, kicking that helmet, because he had to do that like 100 times or something, and in the last take, they were like, oh, that's beautiful, and he stood up and went, medic, please. Fun times. There was a lot of weird stuff on that set. How, I believe it was Billy Boyd and Orlando Bloom found each other at the airport because Billy Boyd went, that looks like an elf. And then they talked to each other and went, yep, we're going to the Lord of the Rings. And it was Billy Boyd's birthday, so they got drunk. And then they flew to the other side of the planet, where suddenly it was his birthday again, so they got more drunk. Anyway, back to the actual story of the Lord of the Rings. Sailing off to the Undying Lands. That is a thing you hear a lot about in the movie. That is a thing you hear a lot about in the books. What ends up happening when sailing to the Undying Lands. That is Valinor. That is the realm of the Valar, where the elves will all go home to at the end of their time on Middle-earth. There are some people that are allowed to go there as well. Those being the Maiar, such as Gandalf, where he sails off as well, and all of the ring-bearers that are still around. Bilbo, Frodo, and eventually Samwise Gamgee. He did not hold the ring for long, but he still held it, and therefore was allowed to be on the last ship sailing out of Middle-earth. Another person that was really not allowed to go, but went anyway, was the totally platonic life mate of one blonde-haired elf. So, Legolas, wanting to sail off to the Undying Lands, promised his friend Gimli that he would stay and they would work together to build up Gondor, build up the Glittering Caves, and kind of just explore the world. They explored many different things. They went through Fangorn, went through the caves as well. Beautiful things, beautiful experiences. And then Legolas built a boat and looked at Gimli and said, come on, let's go. And Gimli is the only dwarf that was ever welcomed into the Undying Lands. None of the other dwarves are allowed, and none of them have ever been there before, or even cared to go. But Legolas said, let's go, and Gimli's like, alright, and went on with them. Oh, I've been talking about literally everything except one of the most important things about the Lord of the Rings, which is the Lord of the Rings, Sauron. Where Sauron was one of the greatest tacticians and greatest kind of like masters of evil, and second in command only compared to Melkor. Working under the basically personification of evil, Sauron is a Maiar on the same level as like Gandalf and Saruman. But obviously way more powerful because he wanted to get more power. He learned a lot from Elvish craftsmen, can't speak, and eventually learned how to forge the rings. Now, the first 3 rings, the ones of the elves, were not done by Sauron. So the elves were able to kind of block out that power and keep them hidden. Then you have the dwarvish rings, where he had a part to play in it, but was not super invested in it. It's also the dwarvish rings. The dwarves were so almost single-minded that Sauron couldn't push their will. He couldn't do anything against them. The only thing that he was actually able to do is influence men, humans. the 9 rings of mortal men doomed to die. He gave them to people being like, it'll make you immortal. You'll be great. You'll be super powerful like the elves. And then the 9 kings took them and became ring wraiths. I mean, it was bad. Speaking of the ring wraiths, they had a whole war with the kingdom just outside the Shire, which, if I'm remembering my history right, technically the Shire was part of that war, but it was like 800 years prior to anything we know of in The Lord of the Rings, so they have forgotten that history. But in the books, the lovely quartet, I guess, of hobbits finds themselves in the hole of a Barrow-wight. Kind of a very spooky, it's gonna kill you ghost. And the one that ends up saving them is none other than the ever-glorious, first of all, Tom Bombadil. Who, anyone who has watched the movie has no idea what Tom Bombadil is at all. We'll get to that in a minute. But when Bombadil saves the hobbits, pulls them out of the Barrow-wight's barrow, I guess? The grave. He hands them all swords. Daggers, but swords for the hobbits. These are incredibly important, because that happened in the Fellowship. They are not relevant again until Return of the King. Because the wonderful Meriadoc Brandybuck stabs the Witch King of Angmar with one of these daggers. These daggers that were specifically designed to kill the Barrow-wights, which are the Nazgul. So if they did not get stuck in that grave, they never would have been able to kill the Witch King. So Eowyn never would have had her I am no man moment, because Merry stabbed the Witch King and thus released the immortality, basically, allowing her to just go and being done with it. It's confusing how all that kind of led into existence, but it all did. And that's one of the major themes of Tolkien's work is, yes, people can get you so far, but it is up to God to make the final decision. This is another thing when it came to Frodo. He completed his task to get the ring to Mount Doom. There was no way that he was going to get rid of it. There was no way. Tolkien even said that he was never going to give up the ring. It was up to God, it was up to Iluvatar to finish the story. But Iluvatar was not going to teleport the ring there and do it. It had to be, the work had to be done, but the final step had to be in God's hand. As he said. Speaking of hands, the legendary tale that is told around the Shire and around most of the world after the War of the Rings is about Samwise the Stout-Hearted and Frodo of the 9 Fingers. Because Frodo puts the ring on and then Gollum bites his finger off. So instead of 10, he's got 9. Little messed up. Right? A little messed up, but it's fun. Okay, so this has been a semi-aimless rant that you've been listening to about Lord of the Rings. I have so much more that I could talk about, but it's Christmas, and I don't have a lot of time to film. So, this is what it is for now. I will do a part 2 at another time, but stay tuned for more fantastical rants. I will be talking about everything. Actually, leave what you want me to rant about in the comments, and I'll either know about it or learn about it and rant about it. So, this is going to be great. Love you all. Have a wonderful new year. And yeah, bye-bye.
Copyright 2025 FSF PopCast. Reference any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF PopCast. The views expressed by guests are their own and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpopcast.com.